All right, I did want to mention that I have Mark Rincon here, and he is a lead for this Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative, and he's here to help offer technical support. Annie Hicks should be joining us as well, and she serves in that same role with the Nevada Digital Learning Collaborative. So either of them will be monitoring that chat as we get going forward. So please ask your questions. If I miss something, please just unmute your microphone and ask those questions. I'm happy to entertain those because I really want this session to be about you and what you need working with early learners. That's really our theme. This is going to be a series. It's okay if there's one or two you can't catch along the way. These sessions will be recorded, so I'm going to go ahead and push that record now before I forget. So if there's a session that you can't make, but you still want to be a part and get that content, please know that these will be recorded, and I'll share where to find that in just a little bit, actually at the end of the session. So the theme or the goal of this series is really about early learners and how we can set them up successfully for technology independence. I was a former kindergarten first grade teacher, so I really understand the background that these early learners are bringing into our classrooms. And I think sometimes integrating technology scares us a little bit because we know that it's going to take at the beginning some time to really get our students in a place where they can even log into the device successfully independently. So I think a lot of us, when we were forced into this emergency distance learning, we found that our students weren't as independent as we would have liked them to be. And so we can use as an opportunity to really start to build this independence with our students. So in my current role, I am supporting the technology initiative in our district. We, being rural, we are behind the curve of most other districts when it comes to integrating technology. And so our teachers are just now getting access to devices in their classrooms. And so this really, the last 3 years, that's been our focus. And so the things that I'll share today really come from that experience with these teachers in the classroom. And I really make it a point to be in classrooms myself at least once a week. And right now our primary focus has been K-1 classrooms. So hopefully you find these tips successful and this process of integrating technology in our classrooms, hopefully this can help guide you. And of course, if you have had successes, please share that with the group because we all need to lean on each other in this time. All right. So again, you can access today's materials at this bit.ly. It's in the chat as well, and we can bump it back to the bottom if anybody needs it. I just wanted to point out that I've taken this material from lots of different places. As we know in the education world, we're really expanding the professional learning opportunities through text. And so all of this content came from different technology books that I've read, seminars that I've been to by these people who've written these texts. And so you will find this reference page at the end of the materials that you can download. And so I would highly recommend reading any of these books. All of them are pretty user-friendly for teachers when you don't have a lot of time. So I just wanted to point that out. So how today will look is we're really going to start with some beliefs and technology goals. I just want to make sure that we have a shared perspective so that you can really understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully these will already align with the philosophies that you have. I'm going to give you some tips for early learners so that we can have those planted in the back of our mind as we move forward with the content. And then we're really going to start this work with phase 1 of technology integration and what that means for us as teachers and what that means for our students. And then we're going to dive into Flipgrid. And Flipgrid is one of the easiest places to start with our early learners. And so we'll experience that as a student. And then for those that like the tutorial on how to set it up as a teacher, I'll spend the last 30 minutes really walking you through the steps of setting it up for use in your classroom. Any questions before I continue forward? I see the request to put that in the chat, and so I'm just going to do that quickly for those that might have missed that. Oops. All right, there's that link if you need it. All right, so some of the belief systems that really guides this work with technology really starts with the purpose, why we choose to use technology. And really, we have to get to a place where technology is really used to enhance and extend learning opportunities and not just using technology for technology's sake. I know that in our district where we haven't had open access and we haven't had a lot of devices in classrooms, teachers maybe didn't use it for that specific purpose. They used it to expose students for testing reasons. And I think that we really have to move beyond that if we want to really maximize what technology can do for our students. Also, we have this philosophy that we don't just want students using technology to consume, and we really want them to be creators and contributors to this digital world. And we're going to talk more about that today. The third thing that we really want technology to do is to really help students think. So there's lots of tools out there that support different kind of thinking work, but we want students to be thinkers and problem solvers, and we want to leverage technology in a way that can allow this to happen. And then of course, when we're choosing a tool, we really want our students to be able to explain the tool, the how it works and what it's for, and the why. And I think that's something that we sometimes miss is, why would we use this tool? What purpose does it have? I think sometimes students go through the motions with us, but they have no idea why we're doing what we're doing. And with that in mind, the students really should be the ones with the technology in their hands. I think as teachers, we have crafted our skill to use technology to present information, and we just really need to make sure that we are transitioning students into using that technology to create things. Because it offers these opportunities for differentiated instruction, to share information with a truly authentic audience, and it really encourages collaboration. So those are kind of the belief systems that I'm moving forward with. I just want you to take a minute and reflect on this. Does that align with your thinking? Is there anything you would add or possibly dispute that's on that list? Just take a minute and type in the chat. How are you feeling about these beliefs and goals with technology, and share if there's something that you feel like is missing from this list. I love that, Mimi. Technology brings people together. You are so right. I think that we've really all experienced that ourselves during, the last, 4, 5, 6 months that we've really had to rely on technology. Yeah. Annie, I agree. It's hard sometimes to remember. We get in our motion as a teacher and we just do what we do, and we sometimes forget to tell kids why we're doing what we're doing, rather than just, it's an activity that we do in our classroom, so I want you to comply with that. The other thing about that is we have to share that with families sometimes too. I know families are feeling overwhelmed, especially when we're introducing new tools to students they may not be independent in yet, but really helping parents understand the possibilities. Yeah, Lori. Yeah, sometimes we just need validation, and it's nice to lean on each other and have that validation so that we continue doing those good practices. Yes, that enhancement, if used correctly, that's the key word there, right? All right, so we're going to come back to these beliefs and goals in future sessions, but just keep those things in mind, and keep those things in mind as you're talking to your colleagues, because sometimes we have to be reminded also why we're doing what we're doing. We're not just doing it to do it. We really have to be purposeful with those pieces, especially with our early learners, because we know that if we're going to get devices out for an activity where they're creating something digitally, it's going to take some time and it's going to take some patience and flexibility on our part as well. So here are just some tips, and I chose to give these tips early on because I want to be able to come back to these. I want us to be able to add to this list by learning from each other. And I think it's important for you to know that as I model things, I'm going to try to keep these things in mind too, because really they're tips for early learners, but they're also tips for all learners. So I'm just going to keep reminding us back to these. So with early learners, one of the things that I hear from teachers most is, I'm afraid to get the devices out because my kids don't have those reading and writing skills that they need. And so that poses several challenges, right? We want to make sure that we're giving students plenty of opportunity to build those reading and writing skills by actually reading books and not relying on technology. And also, some platforms are really limiting to students if they can't spell. So if it's a platform where they're having to add images, well, those words have to be spelled correctly for them to find those images to even add into their product that they're creating. And so one tip that I have is to begin with video or voice creation platforms. That's why we're starting with Flipgrid, because Flipgrid does not require students to have any reading and writing skills to be successful. The other tip that I have is, if you are using a platform where students are going to be inserting images or content, is to have a word bank for that topic. So for example, if I'm having students create a little poster, a collage, maybe we're studying something in science about plants and I want them, to search for some plants and use some of those key terms. If I have a word bank for students to access, then it makes my job as a teacher much easier. I'm not having to run around and help students spell all those words correctly for images they're trying to insert into whatever they're creating. So really leveraging academic vocabulary and those content words. It can be really helpful when we're using these technology creation platforms. The other just really simple tip that I have is that if you're teaching students to use a platform, a new platform, outside of their toolbox of platforms they already know, is to just put a link to that specific website in the assignment or in your learning management system. So for example, if you use Google Classroom and you want students to go to Flipgrid, instead of spending all that time for them to type Flipgrid, www.flipgrid.com, or search for Flipgrid, just put a link directly in your LMS so they literally just have to click on that link and it takes them where they need to go. We can work on those other efficiency skills with keyboarding and stuff at a different time. Sometimes we just need them to get where we want them to get. The other thing is to allow exploration time. I think of it like hands-on manipulatives. In math, if we're going to be using a new counter, we let kids have some time to play with that tool before we ever dive in and actually do something with the content. It's the same thing with these technology platforms. They get so very excited with all the, the fancy things that they can do, that we have to give them time to just play with it first before we ever expect them to put some content in there and have it be an actual learning process. The other thing is, as early educators, I'm sure that you already know this tip, but it's just that reminder to chunk those demonstrations into really simple steps. Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves when we're teaching a new tool, even to adults, and we give a series of steps for students to do, but it's not in a small enough bite-sized chunk. So really be thinking, 1, 2 steps, and then pause them so they can see that next set of steps when we're trying to teach that new platform. If we don't do this, what happens is we become like tech support, right? And everybody's at a different place, so we're running around the classroom all crazy because everybody's at a different place. So just keep that in mind. If you find yourself and you feel like you're becoming tech support and you're running all over the classroom, that's a good time to just pause, get everybody to the same place so that you can then start to give those bite-sized simple steps again to the students. And then also really be thinking about how they can build that product phase by phase. And what I mean by that is if they are creating a product that has some text and some pictures, have them add the pictures first. Everybody gets that part done. Okay, now go back and add the words, add that content at a later time. I was just in a first grade classroom and we were using the platform Adobe Spark Video. And there were 3 things students really needed to add to their product. And we realized we gave them too much. We were saying, okay, get your pictures in there. Now get some text. Okay, now record. We really needed to manage that challenge for them and get all the pictures in and then get all the text in and then do that voice recording. So really be thinking about how you can take that project or that product and break it into those simple phases for students. It also helps transfer that independence when we're not sitting with them, coaching them, for them to think about how to tackle a project in a more streamlined way. So with those tips in mind, just want to give you a minute to share anything you've learned along the way that you feel like is really essential for early learners to be successful in using technology. And you can use the chat feature, or if you feel comfortable just unmuting, by all means unmute and share those tips if you have any that you feel like would be good for the whole group.
Hi, this is Caitlin. This is less of a logistical tip, but I'm just thinking about the social emotional aspect of accessing technology for young children. And I know as adults, sometimes we have full-on meltdowns when we're having trouble with Zoom or an app or technology. So I think something that comes to mind for me is helping kids learn self-regulation and coping skills and things like when the technology isn't going your way, what to do, how to help yourself calm down when you're getting frustrated.
I love that tip, Caitlin. Thank you for sharing. You know, that is so true. And, you know, we all have those moments where we're going to, you know, burst into tears. And so when we see that in our classroom, we have to be okay with allowing that to happen and then help them shape that in a different way. Absolutely. I love that connection. I jotted it down so that we can add it for our tips as we share this with others. Anybody else have anything they would like to share or things they've noticed as they've used technology with their early learners? All right, I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about the 2 ways that we really use technology. So as users of technology, we really use technology either to consume information or to contribute and create things to share out there with the digital world. So if we think about ourselves as consumers, you know, maybe we're a part of social media of some kind. Maybe I'm going to use Facebook as my example. So on Facebook, I can just be a consumer by scrolling through the feed and looking at other people's posts and looking at the pictures that they've created. But until I actually create my own post or comment on someone's post, I'm not contributing as a digital user of that specific tool. And so sometimes what we see happen in classrooms is we use technology solely for the purpose of consuming. We have students watch videos, we have them on learning platforms where they're taking in information and maybe doing a little bit of guided practice, but they're never actually creating things and sharing it out with the world or sharing it with an authentic audience. And we really want to have a balance of both. It's not saying one is better than the other, but we really need to get our students, even our really very early learners, understanding the power of creating digital media and sharing that out, sharing what you know with the world, because we can't consume digital content if nobody's creating it and contributing to the digital world with it. So it's, as we think about this series moving forward, we're going to really focus more on this idea of contribution. How can we have students create things that they can then share out, obviously to a controlled audience, but so that they're really understanding the power that technology has for learners And so I just want you to do a self-check if you're comfortable sharing, just in the chat, just tell me if you're more of a consumer or a contributor. And really right now, just think kind of more, as a personal user, not so much as an education user. Do you consume more or contribute more? I know for myself, I'm more of a consumer. Like I'm one of those Facebook trolls, right? I read everybody's stuff, but I'm like not sharing stuff out there with the world. So where do you fall? Lots of consumers. I love that idea, Mimi, that you want to contribute more. Yes. Yeah, so lots of consumers, and I think that we find ourselves in that. But if we did not have people who contributed to that digital world, we'd have nothing to consume. And so I'm constantly trying to remind myself that I need to contribute also if I want to take advantage of that consumption. And so as we think about this with our learners in our classroom, we really want to start to shift our thinking away from just consuming and be thinking, what can my students create using a different platform than what they normally would do? I think right now too, I mean, every school district is balancing how they're teaching kids in a different way. We have every model possible in Lyon County. We have some kids fully in person. We have some kids full distance. We have some kids hybrid every other week. We have all kinds of things going on in our district. But what I see happening is most of the time students are spending is consuming information. And so I think that we're losing an opportunity to engage some students because we're not having them create things. And so just really start to think about that creation side when you're doing your lesson planning. Obviously, because we know it takes so much time with early learners to get devices out, get logged in, and learn these new tools, we're not going to probably do it for every single lesson, not even every single day, but really be thinking, how can I have my students create something at the end of this unit or as a midpoint assessment in this unit? Because these creations can double as formative assessments for us as educators. Questions or comments on this idea of the two ways that we use technology? All right. So really, when I think about integrating technology in a classroom, it really is a three-phase process. And I think sometimes those that don't understand how classrooms work, especially with early learners, they give us technology and they want to see it be in this last phase, student directed, without really thinking about the process to get there. And so I just really want to validate that our early learners are not going to be self-directed using technology without us spending time going through each of these phases. And everybody's going to move through these phases at a different speed. But when we're first getting started with thinking about students creating things digitally, typically we live in this teacher-directed phase for about a semester. So it takes time to build capacity for ourselves and for our students with having a variety of tools that we have at our disposal to use for learning purposes. And so that's the reason that the first 4 sessions of this series are really just focused on teacher directed and building our own toolkit. Because if we don't build these routines and procedures and true independence for our students, when we send them off away from us, they're not successful. And I know that was something that I heard from the teachers that I support is, when we went to emergency distance learning, their kids could not function. And so their parents were frustrated and they were frustrated. And so it's really about building true independence. And so as we talk about these phases, don't feel like you're going to need to get through all these phases by next week. This is going to take time and it's a process. So I'm not going to touch guided or student directed yet. I just want to give you some people are like big picture thinkers. They can't move on unless they really know where they're headed. And so I'm going to give you a quick overview of the 3 phases, and then we're going to really hyper focus on teacher directed. So in the teacher directed phase, I'm in control as a teacher. I decide the when and the where and the how with technology. I'm telling students exactly what tool they're using. I'm telling them what I want it to look like. I'm in charge. When we move to the second phase and we move to guided, this is when we start to allow students to make some choices. So, maybe they know how to do a Google drawing and they know how to make a flyer in Canva, and I say you can do either or, you choose. So I'm slowly starting to shift that ownership over to students, but it's still controlled choice, right? It's not free, open for everybody. It's here's your choices based on what I know you can be independent in. And then the third phase is really where students are fluent with technology, right? We say log in, they can log in with no tears. We say, I want you to make a flyer. They say, oh, I could make that in Canva, or I could make a Google drawing. I need you to make a presentation. They say, oh, I could do that in Google Slides, and they can do it without tech support from us. And so at that point, that's when we really can shift to a student-directed classroom where we can say, here's what we need to accomplish. Here's what I need you to show me that you know. You figure out how you want to do it. And this is really where students in the third phase, this is really where we really integrate the consumption and the creation together. Some students might need to consume some information by watching a video, while others are like, I want to read a book about it. And so at that point is when we really shift that ownership over to students. But we can't be there day one just because they've given us devices. And so think of it kind of like that gradual release process. I do, we do, you do, and it's going to take time to get there. But our focus for the next few sessions is really going to be on this teacher-directed part, because we have to build capacity too as teachers. And I think sometimes what happens is, people who are in leadership roles see something great and they think about the potential that can happen, and they want it now. And they forget to give teachers time to get there. And so this phase isn't just about kids, it's about us as learners too, so that we can build our capacity to integrate technology and these tools in a meaningful way. So does anybody have any questions just about that broad overview and where we're heading? I just want to make sure those big picture thinkers, have their questions answered so they can really move forward and focus on one phase. All right. So we're going to go over some characteristics of this teacher-directed phase. And there are really 4 things we're trying to accomplish in this phase. And I'm going to go over them each in a little more depth in just a minute. So in this phase, we're trying to establish routines, procedures, and expectations. We're trying to just have technology be part of our flow in our classroom in a productive way. We're trying to build a toolkit of technology platforms for ourselves and for our students. We're going to really introduce this idea of rubrics or checklist. People use those words interchangeably, and so we'll talk about what I mean by that in just a minute. And then we're really going to talk about a simple 3-step process that we can use in our classrooms as teachers when students are using platforms to create rather than just consume. So routines, procedures, and expectations. As early learner teachers, we know this is make it or break it for our game, right? If we don't have routines or procedures established in our classroom, it's chaos. And so the same is true when we introduce technology to students. We have to think about all those little minute details of how we want this to work in our classroom for it to be successful. And of course, we have to make mid-course corrections if it's not working. And so I think one of the biggest things that we have to have in our classroom are login cards, where the student's username and password is written down somewhere. This helps save our sanity in the moment when kids are like, I can't remember my password. You know where to find it. So that's just one of the first things up front that we really have to make sure we know where it is and we know how we're sharing it with our students. The other thing is when we're thinking about devices, when we first introduce devices and, maybe you're in a one-to-one district and every kid has their own and they're a kindergarten student and they're like so excited to have their own device. They want to use it all the time, right? They want it for everything. And so one of the tools that we have found has worked in our classrooms is this stoplight chart. And so how this works is, as a teacher, I have like a clip on it, or I in some way show students where we are on the stoplight. If the green is on, it means, okay, your device is out, you're logged in, and you're ready to use it because we're going. You know, maybe it's after a break, after lunch, and the kids see the green, they know, oh, get my device out and get logged in, so I'm ready to go. Yellow means we are going to use devices and I need you to be logged in, but I want you to do what we call clamshell. Clamshell means you just close your device to 45 degrees. In most cases, that allows you to stay logged in because you're not actually closing your device, you're just making it so that they can't see what's happening. If you're an iPad district, your yellow would be flip it over, right? Be logged in if you have a login system, and then flip your device over so that when we're ready for it, it's ready to go and we don't have to waste that time with logging in. And then red is nope, we're not even using computers, so keep them stored wherever you have them stored. They stay there and you don't need them. And so this visual cue kind of helps those overly eager, you know, early learners know if devices are going to be needed or not needed. So just two really simple tips that I have for you. So I want to give you a chance to share with one another what are some routines and procedures or expectations that you've set for your students with devices? What's worked? Maybe even share something, I tried this, but had to change it because of this. So if anybody is willing to share, just go ahead and type in the chat or unmute your microphone if that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable. Don't be shy. Right, like wait time in a virtual world feels really strange. It feels, you know, wait time's already hard for me, but in the virtual world, it feels like an eternity. Yes, I like the connection with distance learning, this idea of mute and unmute. That's huge for early learners, right? It goes back to that excitement that they have for being a learner. They just want to share everything with you and they want everybody to know. Yes, clever, definitely. Clever can be a very positive thing. I know we don't use that in our district yet, but I definitely can see the benefit, especially for early learners. You know, that one-stop shop. Yeah, and I really appreciate the connection too with distance learning, right? Because we're going to have different expectations than we probably ever would in our live classrooms when we're doing distance learning. And sometimes we forget to tell kids what those expectations are. We assume that they're going to just know. Oh, I like that, Linda. Nice. And a way to kind of help manage the way that your classroom's set up. A total advantage when we have such small classes, right? Yeah, nice. I do know that these early learners they're excited about everything, right? Like you can show them a stick and tell them it's a magic wand and they're just so very excited about that. So whenever I'm in a classroom and we get out devices, that enthusiasm takes over and sometimes that can feel overwhelming as a teacher. So I like that you're thinking about how to set it up to be successful. Yeah, Matthew, another great tip for that distance learning. Yeah, QR codes are another really great thing. The thing about QR codes is if you are using Chromebooks, you can still use QR codes, and some people don't know that. So if you're not familiar with QR codes, definitely check that out. All right, so again, the purpose of our teacher-directed phase is to establish these routines and procedures and expectations so that we do have control and it's not chaos when we get devices out, because sometimes that anticipated chaos is what prevents us as teachers from actually getting the devices out and using them with our students, because we know what it could be or what it could look like. Great idea about the badge on their laptop. I think that could work even if you didn't have Clever, or their login card could be on their device with that Velcro. So thank you for sharing. This idea of building a toolkit of technology platforms, again, isn't just for our students, it's for us as well. Another tip that our teachers have found success in is building basically like an anchor chart. a place in the classroom where you keep track of all the tools you're learning. And so if you notice on this graphic, it's just a real simple box. You can make it like with borders that you put around the bulletin board even. And you basically just collect the tools that you're learning as a technology student, you know, the technology skills you're developing. And we like to just use the icons. And so we just print the icons, and as we learn a new tool, we put it in the top of our toolbox. Our toolbox is divided in half, and the top are things we're just learning, and the bottom are things we're pretty good at. Like most students could say, oh, Google Drawing does this, and this is how I would use it. And this helps us when we move to that second phase where we are doing it as a guided, it's guided practice, because I let students choose from things that are in the bottom of the toolbox only. It helps me keep my sanity as a teacher because I know I shouldn't have to be tech support. When they're just learning a tool, it feels like I'm tech support. And so that's one way that we keep track of the tools we're learning. This idea about toolkits is really to build our own capacity of all those great digital tools that exist in the world that we can use for students to either learn or demonstrate their understanding for formative assessment purposes. And so, you know, just really be thinking about how can I keep track of all these things my students know and can do related to technology platforms. The other thing that I just wanted to mention as we're thinking about creation platforms, the ones that I will share specifically are not content specific. So you can use them in ELA, you can use them in math, you can use them in science, you can use them in social studies. They're not content specific platforms or digital tools. They're meant to be used across the board. And so just keep that in mind as a teacher. When you're introducing a new tool, sometimes we inadvertently introduce things to students like in science or social studies because we don't feel that same pressure. And so students start to think, oh, that is just something we do for science and social studies. So really try to challenge yourself and broaden that exposure to other content areas. Any questions about that? If you are interested in building a digital toolkit and you want icons, I have them. If you email me, I will send them to you. They're already in color, they're ready to go. You just have to print them out, and we laminate ours. So again, if that's something you want, feel free to reach out. It's already ready to go for you. And these are platforms that have the correct terms of service and privacy policy for our early learners, so they can be used across the board. Yeah, Matthew, you know, that's an interesting question. I think it could be. It could be the same as creating that resource page inside Google Classroom, absolutely. I think the big thing is you want students to be able to have it readily available and know how to access it when you move to that second phase, so that you as a teacher aren't having to keep track of what tools have we learned as a group. Again, it helps the teacher just as much as it helps the students, but I think you could definitely leverage that inside Google Classroom. All right, the third characteristic when we're thinking about this first phase, this teacher-directed phase, is this idea of rubrics and checklists. So again, everybody has a different definition of what a rubric is and what a checklist is. When I say rubric or checklist, I'm talking about a really simple list for an early learner. You know, I want you to make a collage about, I want you to make a collage of pictures that have the same spelling pattern we've been studying. And so on my checklist, it says you have to have 2 pictures, 2 words that have the same spelling pattern, and you have to, you know, use the spelling, one of those words in a sentence. I'm giving them that specific criteria of what I'm looking for. And I try to keep it about the content, not about how to fancy it up in the tool. So I try to limit putting things like change the font size, change the color. I try to really make this about the content, because this is later what moves them to independence when we get to the guided phase or the student self-directed phase. I can provide students a checklist or rubric with pictures for my early learners and say, I want you to make this. This is what it has to have. You decide what tool you want to use. And maybe you don't want to use a digital tool and you want to make it paper pencil. totally fine as long as it meets this criteria. So it's helpful if you introduce that in this first phase and start to get yourself in this habit of using a rubric or a checklist. So questions about that? Sometimes people think rubric and they think they have to have like these multi-column, multi-row, really cumbersome things. No, that's not what I'm meaning when I say a rubric or checklist. Just basically like, here's what needs to be included. This can help if you have standards-based grading as well, because you can make sure that you have your standards called out on there, and then it basically becomes an assessment piece for you. All right, we're really gonna move into the meat and potatoes of this phase. And this is that 3-step process when creating with technology. How do we get students to be successful in making something digitally without us going crazy and wanting to pull our hair out? So the first step is we just do what we normally do. We teach. Students consume information. They either consume information through a digital platform, if you are doing blended learning, or we teach as teachers, right? We either teach virtually or we teach live in our classroom. Basically, students have to take in some information or consume some information to be able to move to the next step. Because the next step is where we make a plan. This is a crucial step. This is where we say to students, you are going to be making a presentation in Google Slides and you're going to teach me about what we just learned in math. I want to know, how do I add? They're going to actually make a plan for Google Slides. So they're going to draw 3 little boxes, just like if they were making their slides, and they're going to do it paper pencil first. Think of it kind of like a rough draft or a blueprint. This is a step that we want students to transfer into real life. I don't know about you, but I like to do home improvement projects, but I never have a plan. And so then I have to go to the store 12 times because I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing. And so it's the idea that we're teaching students whenever they approach a project, they draft it out first. They have a plan of how they want to move forward. And then once they have that plan, then we actually introduce the tool, but not until they have a plan. Once they have that plan, we say, okay, we're going to use Google Slides. I'm going to teach you how to use Google Slides. I'm going to show you how to add a slide. I'm going to show you how to put a picture in there. I'm going to show you how to add some content. And now take your plan and put it into Google Slides. This is really helpful for students because we have this thing that happens. Our brain can only take in so much information. And it's going to focus either on the tool or the content. And if we try to do both at the same time, the kids are probably going to focus on the tool and what it can do rather than the content. And so when we move through this 3-step process, it naturally helps us as teachers balance and manage that challenge so that we don't feel frustrated, that it becomes more about the technology rather than the content. The other beautiful thing about this 3-step process is if you look at the number of times students are dealing with that content, it's 3 repetitions. And we know with our early learners, they need multiple repetitions and multiple times working with that content. And so this naturally does that. So I'm choosing to do this with a high leverage skill. If it's a skill I need students to master before we can move on. Questions about that? Again, this is the first time you're hearing it, so I don't expect it. Right now, it's really the awareness phase. But any questions about that? Great. The other thing that I wanted to link to is that when we're actually teaching the platform, so I'm teaching Google Slides to students, I can follow a workshop structure that can help me be successful in chunking that time. So, if it's the first time with a tool, I'm going to give students the first 5 minutes to just play with it. See all the things you can figure out with Google Slides without me showing you anything. Just go in there and play with it. After that exploration time, then I can do a mini lesson where I'm just teaching you what I want you to know about that tool. And students don't have devices during that mini lesson. They're either clamshelled, they're flipped over, they're set to the side. They're just watching me demonstrate. Once I've done that demonstration, then I can move into that guided practice where I'm having them do things step by step, or, okay, I've showed you step by step, now just go do it. And then at the end, we have to save time for that share piece. We really have to make sure that students are getting to share whatever they're creating digitally with their peers or beyond, however we're comfortable with that in our classroom. During this debrief and share, this is also the place to have students talk about what was the purpose of this tool, what kind of things can you create with this tool, so that we're always reinforcing the purpose of the tool that we're using with students. So this can just be a way to structure that time. And if you notice, it's about 60 minutes. And it is going to probably take your early learners that long to make something in these platforms. So again, that's why we can't expect to do this every single day with every single thing we're doing in our classroom. We're making strategic decisions as a teacher on when to take something to this creation phase. Questions or comments on that? All right. So I know today is really heavy content, but the next session won't be so heavy because you'll have this background. So we're going to actually experience this as learners. So I've given you lots of information you've consumed, right? I've told you lots of things. I've had my visuals. We've done just a little bit of interaction, not a lot, but a little, but you've consumed that information. So we're going to move into this second phase and we're going to plan to make something on Flipgrid. So Flipgrid is, if you're not familiar with Flipgrid, Flipgrid is it's a video tool. So you don't add anything but a video of yourself. And so you're basically planning a script. And what I want you to record is related to our content. I want you to explain the teacher-directed phase as you understand it right now. So tell me about those 4 characteristics, elaborate on that 3-step process for creating with technology, talk about that teaching structure as you understand it right now, and then how is this going to impact your students? How can you use this with them? So you're going to do this planning phase first. This is the hardest thing for teachers. They want to dive right into the platform, just like students, and play with it. But I'm going to give you just about 3 minutes, and I just want you to jot a quick script. Jot your notes. What are you going to say when you get to the phase where you actually record? And we're gonna do it like students today, and we're gonna just record a quick video. So I want you to plan right now. I'm gonna set my timer for 3 minutes on a blank sheet of paper, a scratch sheet of paper. Just draft out your script. What are you going to say related to those 4 points? Anybody have any questions? All right, 3 minutes. Jot down your ideas. All right, you have about 60 seconds more. All right, I'm gonna pause you. It's okay if you're not done, because before you actually record your video, you can finalize your plan if you're not quite done. So this was that second step. You made a plan. It's gonna help you be prepared when you actually go to record your video. I don't know how many of you, I mean, probably in the spring you experienced this, right? You sat down to record a video for your students and you didn't have a plan, and so you had to push record, stop, let me try again, record again. And you had to keep going through that process. This will save you time up front if you have a plan and you already know what you're gonna say. It helps kids tremendously too, because the first time they go to record a video, they're gonna want it to be perfect. And so if they have a plan, they're more apt to be successful when they record that video. So we're gonna go as students right now. So we're not looking at the teacher side, you're gonna log in as a student. So you're going to go to flipgrid.com and then you're going to do the \NVDLC. So go ahead and go there right now. I'm gonna do the same thing on my end. Now with students, that link that you just saw, that's what I'm putting in my learning management system. So they don't have to search for anything. They don't have to type anything in the web address. They're literally clicking just like I did, and it takes them straight to this assignment. And so you don't have to do this. If you've never used Flipgrid though, I do encourage you to try it out. But Flipgrid's super simple. So if I was with a classroom, your devices would be closed right now and I'd be like, watch me. This is how we do it. And that would be my mini lesson. But as adult learners, I don't need to do that. But it's super simple. I've created this as this assignment. I click record a response. It's gonna prompt me to log in, so you can log in with a credential that you use in your district. Once I'm logged in, it's blocking my camera right now because Zoom is using it, but it would typically open up and I can choose a pretty fancy filter and I can just go ahead and click the record button and use my plan or my script to record my video and then submit it. So I'm gonna give you just a chance to play around with it. If you're not comfortable recording the video, it's totally fine, you don't have to, but at least click that record button and see what happens and see what comes up. Just don't hit submit, you can delete it after you play with it if you don't feel comfortable. So I'm just gonna give you 2 minutes just to play with Flipgrid from the student side. All right, I'm gonna bring us back together. I know that probably wasn't enough time to play with the tool. Again, today is really content heavy, so the tool always gets the short end. But I just wanted to point out a couple things from the student side. So this is exactly what your students will see. If you notice right here, this little blue button, it automatically integrates with Immersive Reader. So once you type your directions in Flipgrid, students can have that read to them by just clicking on that button. And when they do that and push play, it will read the instructions to them. So again, non-readers can still access this tool with very little adult support once we teach them how to use it. So that's one of the features that I love, I just love about Flipgrid. And I also love the simplicity. So I'll show you the teacher side for those that want to see how I got to this place where I actually set it up for students to be able to use in the last optional 30 minutes. So I'm going to go back to my presentation for just a minute. I'm going to kind of wrap up our session for today. And I just want you in the chat to think, how could you use Flipgrid with your students? What could they record a video of that's linked to content that you're doing right now? If you went back to your classroom tomorrow, what could they use Flipgrid for? And if you'll share those ideas in the chat, and then we'll just kind of wrap this part up. Great ideas linked to ELA. Absolutely. Anything with writing, regardless of age. And yes, responding to a read aloud, a book that they've read, a retell. Ooh, I like the link with letters and sounds. Characteristics and the settings of the story. Love all those ideas. It's another really great platform to also use to teach any concept. So, you know, in math, we're learning how to count. Explain to me how to do that. Can you demonstrate and have some manipulatives in front of you while you do it? I see Lori saying she's used it to introduce. I'm thinking she's probably used it to introduce themselves. Yeah, it's a great getting to know you platform where you can learn more about your students. Anything that you would want students to be able to teach you about can be done in Flipgrid. The other comment that I want to make about Flipgrid is you can have the videos turned on so that other students see those recordings and can then respond via video. So you can get some discourse going even for students who are full distance with their classmates. So that's another benefit of Flipgrid. So I'm going to wrap up the whole group hour session, and then those of you that want to see the teacher side, how to set that part up, or you have other specific questions, we can stay on after this part. So I just wanted to remind you of my email address. So for this particular project, we are using our names at .nvdlc@gmail.com. It's also on the original flyer. So if you have any questions or you want any of the materials that I talked about, especially those tech tool icons, you can send me an email to that address and I will make sure to get those back to you. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is that, like I said, this was being recorded. And so this particular recording can later be found on the Nevada Ready YouTube channel. The bit.ly's down there at the bottom, and it's also in the session notes from today. So you can go back and access this, or you can share it with your colleagues if you feel like, you know, maybe there's others that could benefit from this. So I really appreciate you joining me today. Hopefully you got some ideas going. Hopefully you feel like it was useful for your time. A survey will follow tomorrow, and I ask you to please be really honest in it. That's how we know if we're meeting the needs of our clients, those we serve in Nevada. So please send those comments and take that survey. It'll really help us as we're moving forward. So thank you again for joining, and I'm going to go ahead. If anybody wants to stay on, I'll show you how to set it up and get to the point from the teacher side. I'll give people just a minute to make a decision if they want to go ahead and stay on. You are welcome, Matthew, Lindsay, Takia. You're very welcome. You're welcome, Mimi, Lori. Yes, Annie makes a good point. Feel free to share the flyer with your colleagues. It's okay if they miss the first session. All right, so I'm assuming those of you that are remaining on the line, you want to see how to set it up as a teacher. So I'm going to walk through those steps. It's probably helpful if you either share, like split your screen, or you navigate between tabs and actually set one up that you can use in your classroom, you know, in the next week. So let me go ahead and get logged out of this one. So you're just going to go to flipgrid.com. So the thing about Flipgrid that I love is that they take student privacy really seriously. So everything, when you set this up as a teacher, it's password protected. You're going to set it up so only your students in your school district can access it. It's very secure and safe, which is huge because kids are recording themselves, right? And you know, we don't want these videos being shared beyond our classroom unless we've gotten that permission from our families. So if you've never used Flipgrid before, you're going to just go ahead and go through the educator sign up process. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. I obviously have already set up an account, so I'm just going to log in. I don't know how your districts operate, but in our district, whenever teachers can choose to log in with Google or log in with Microsoft, that's what we suggest, so that you're not having to keep track of passwords for all these different platforms that you are using with your students. And we encourage the same thing with our students because we don't have Clever. So just another little tip as you use technology for more technology for your students and yourself. Once you're to a place where you're successfully logged in, if you'll just in the chat say got it or give me a thumbs up so that I know that I can go to that next part. All right, Jennifer, thank you. All right, so once you're logged in, there's lots and lots of things that Flipgrid can do. Today, we're just going to focus on up here at the top. You see how there's all kinds of different menus. We're just going to focus on the discussion menu. That's what we did. That's what you saw as a student when you clicked on that link. We're going to focus just on this discussion part. And so to set it up, you are setting up what are called groups in Flipgrid. So you're going to create a group. This is where you set the permissions for your students to access it. So go ahead and click on create a group. And it's really important when you're using this with students that you create a private group. Notice how you can navigate between the two. We want it to be private. From here, this is where you're going to go ahead and give it a name. So you could call it your class, if you, however you want to name it, whatever makes sense for you. If you're just playing with it, you can also just do a sample one right now so that you know later to go back and delete it if you don't want to use it. Once you give it a name, you can also customize your join code. So that's how I set up the NVDLC. You can customize it right here. So if I wanted it to be Mrs. Westmoreland, I could customize that right there. That is a join code that they could use instead of a link. So you could say, go to Flipgrid and you're going to type in this code and it will have you join our group. So the way that I recommend setting this up is using student email. This only works if you are using Microsoft or Google. If you don't have Microsoft or Google and you have to do student username, you are creating your student roster in Flipgrid. I'm going to show you with student email because there's a really important step that if you don't set it up correctly, your students won't be able to access it. So click student email and then click next. So you have a couple different options when you get to this phase. You can actually upload an Excel file, a CSV file, so that only students who you put their email address in can access the group that you're creating. If you want it to be more open, you can actually just type the domain for your student account. So in Lyon County, our domain is @student.lyoncsd.org. I have to actually type that in and push enter for it to allow students to join. So if you're not going to upload the email addresses directly in there, you want to make sure that you put your domain in exactly as students will type in their email address. The other feature that's new is you can add this guest password if you want students to create things in Flipgrid and allow their families to see it. So if you toggle this button on, you can enter that password that can then be shared with families. Again, completely your choice. If you don't want to go there yet, you just keep the button toggled off. Once you've put in your domain, then you're going to click next, and it's going to create that group for you. If you have multiple classes, which isn't typically true of early elementary teachers, but say I was a secondary teacher, I could set one class up and then duplicate it. That's what it's asking you, to duplicate your topics. You can just click skip for now. Once you've done that, your group can now be shared. This is what you would copy and paste and share in your learning management system. You can share it in, I believe you can share it in Canvas. Nope, you can't share it in Canvas directly from here, but you can click copy and share it in Canvas. You can send it straight to Microsoft Teams. You can send it straight to Google Classroom so that students can just join that group by clicking on it. So once you have your group created, now it's time to actually create topics. Topics are the equivalent of assignments. So when you create a topic, it's creating that assignment for students to record their videos for. That's where you're putting all your directions. So to add a topic or an assignment, you just click add a topic. And this is where you type in that information. So I'm going to give my assignment a title. This is where I actually type the directions. This is where I put my checklist of what I want students to include. You know, maybe I want them to tell me about themselves. I want their name, their age, their favorite color. This is what Immersive Reader will read to them if they can't read themselves. So anything that you're typing in the prompt box will be able to be read to them. You can change the recording time. This is nice as a teacher. So, right, we don't want to be watching 10-minute videos where kids are just going on and on and on. So we can limit them and it just cuts them out. If you're like, I want a 30-second video and that's it, you just say 30 seconds. And when 30 seconds are over, it cuts them off. So you can control that as a teacher. Closed captioning are available for our students with special needs, and so we can change the language here. This also can help support our EL learners by putting it in their home language. If I'm an EL teacher and I'm supporting mostly students who speak Spanish, I could turn the closed captions on in Spanish. This video moderation is a really important feature. So this is what either opens the videos up for my other classmates to see or keeps them private so only the teacher can see it. With early learners, they're not so worried about their classmates seeing their video, right? Like they're excited if other people see their video. But when you're talking middle and high school students, they don't want their video shared with their classmates. And so it is automatically defaulted to be the private, only the teacher can see it. If you want them to be able to see each other's video, you have to toggle the button on. It's a little confusing because of the way it's worded. So by default, it means private only for you. Toggled on means their classmates can see it. So now you can get like super fancy as a teacher, and you can add read aloud that they're going to respond to from YouTube. You can record yourself reading and put it in this, so they have to first watch that and then do a response to it. You can put a Kahoot game. I mean, you can get really, really fancy with adding media to this topic or this assignment. If you just want it simple and you already put your directions up here, you can just go ahead and say create topic. Once you do this, you're all set. You can share this specific link in your classroom as well, and it will take them straight to that assignment rather than to that group. So you can either share your group link or you can share your topic link that will take them straight to that topic. Once you're finished, you're all done. But now as a teacher, you want to know, like, where do I find this stuff when I'm finished? And so when you log out of Flipgrid and then you log back in the first time, it's going to take you to your dashboard. And in your dashboard, you would find your specific group. Let me find a group that I know has videos. I would click on my group, and then I would find my topic or my assignment. And then there's all the video responses that I can watch as a teacher. So I'm giving all of the feedback in Flipgrid. So as a teacher, I can record a video back to them rather than typing things even, which is important for early learners, especially, you know, if I'm having them explain a math concept, I can give them feedback if they have a misconception. And so you can leverage that video piece as a teacher as well. So you would find all their videos back in Flipgrid. If you are linked with Google Classroom, you can watch them in Google Classroom as well as a teacher. I do find it's easier just to go to Flipgrid though, and then go to that specific response and view them that way. All right, so I know that was a lot of information, a lot of content. Does anybody have any questions about how to set Flipgrid up? The other thing I did forget to mention is you can add co-pilots, and a co-pilot means like a co-teacher. So, you know, if you have an EL teacher or a special education teacher that pushes into your classroom or supports your students, you can add them to your grid right here under the edit button. You can add a co-pilot, and so those co-pilots can then view the videos as well, and they can leave the video feedback and responses. All right, does anybody have any other questions, things they're wondering about? Doesn't even necessarily have to be related to what we talked about tonight. I'm here to help you be successful. So anything that anybody would want to share, ask, question about, seek clarification. Yeah, Linda, absolutely. So the email address part. So when I am creating a group, so it's that step where I'm getting my kids into Flipgrid for the first time. Student email, are you thinking student email is going to be how your students access it? Okay, so you have two choices as a teacher. You can decide, do I want them to log in with their student email, or I'm going to create a username for each of my students. So either way, the process is pretty similar. If your kids, do your students have access to their email accounts? Like, do they know their emails? No, probably not. Kindergarten, that's tricky. I've always set it up with student email, but let's take a look at student username. Maybe that would be the easier way for you to go. I would probably do it this way if your kids aren't familiar with accessing it. So you're just gonna put in, you're gonna have to actually hand enter or upload. I would just put your students' names in and then give them a username. You could customize it so it's the same username that they use to log into their computer or wherever they have usernames. So, you know, maybe this is hers always. You can add it like that. And then that would be how you create the ability for them to log in. That's probably going to be the easier way to go if you're not having your students regularly log into things with their email account. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks again for joining. We'll do the next session. And again, feel free, if this isn't meeting your needs, don't feel like you have to come just because you signed up for the series when you registered. It has to meet your needs. If you feel like there are other colleagues that could benefit, please share that flyer, share the registration form with them, have them email me or Annie or Mark. We just want to make sure that we're helping teachers out there be successful in this chaos that we exist in right now. So thank you so much. And if you need anything, I'm only an email away. So don't be shy about emailing me directly. Great, Linda, I love that. All right, thank you so much, everyone.